Three, one, two, three. Well, hello out there. How's everybody doing? Is everybody's favorite conservative in New York, Christopher Wright, here to present you with the first episode of the Christopher Wright Show. Hey, didn't have a little introduction for everybody, but I just wanted to kind of let people know for the past month, I've been telling you about the Christopher Wright Show. And this is going to be your first official episode. And what I want to do is bring just different guests from around the country that are, just got different opinions when it comes to the state of politics. And these two patriots are some people that I've met at local events around here in New York. And we had some great conversations, and we had some really deep conversations about a lot of important topics. And so I want to come on today to kind of speak on an important matter. As we know, everything that happens recently with the election, the stealing an election, and what's happened with the president in regards to him getting cast by the media as being this guy who started this whole, debacle at the Capitol. And we all know it's fake news and how they're getting down. So what I want to speak on was a matter that people have been talking about out there. And I want to kind of to my two guests kind of get on and kind of give a little background on who they are, and we can go from there.
Great. Well, I'll go ahead, I guess, and then Jose, I guess you're going to be on unless you have other guests. I'm Diane Sayre, and I'm a candidate for U.S. Senate against Chuck Schumer in the 2022 elections, and I am a 30-year associate of Lyndon LaRouche, who ran for president 8 times, and we'll be talking a little bit about that shortly.
All right. And Jose? Right,
Excuse me. Hi, yes. I am Jose Vega, and I'm a political activist working on the Sayre for Senate campaign.
All right, excellent. All right, so let's start off. What I want to start off with is something that I've been hearing about. This is a matter, and you guys know, my listeners out there who are familiar with my work know I'm bad with names. Forgive me on this, but there's a recent video going around circling the web of a former 3-star general, General
McInerney.
Say it again for me, Diane.
Well, go ahead.
Yes. And he recently came out and he made a statement in regards to the recent storming of the Capitol or whatever. He's not, we already kind of talked about in a previous video, and he's coming out and saying that what's happening on that day of the Capitol is high treason because there were special ops who were undercover dressed as members of Antifa who supposedly were there and who participated in taking Nancy Pelosi's laptop, which is currently unknown where it's at. And that's why she's been reacting the way she's been acting when it comes to impeachment and everything else. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying I'm putting it out there because there's videos out there circulating, and I want to speak on it. And I want to get your guys' thoughts on how you feel about the entire matter. Diane, if you want to begin.
Well, I think they've made a terrible mistake for them, which is last night on CNN, Douglas Brinkley, the historian for CNN, was commenting on this completely absurd impeachment vote that they had in the House. I mean, President Trump has, what are we at now, the 14th? So about a little under a week left before Biden is going to be sworn in. So what on earth is the necessity of impeaching President Trump? What is their fear? Well, they gave it away because they said what's going to happen, what Douglas Brinkley said, is that President Trump will go the way of Lyndon LaRouche. He'll be forgotten and no one will know him. Now, once you say the name Lyndon LaRouche, any political leader who's done that has destroyed themselves, because LaRouche's case was indeed the precedent for this. And I'd like to go into that. Shall I go ahead, Chris?
Yes, please
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
The reason why as guys know, that the topic is let's talk about the deep state. And what we're seeing right now, we feeling what's going on with our president, Donald J. Trump, is very similar to what's happening to a gentleman by the name of Mr. LaRouche. And I talked to Diane yesterday for a very long time about this matter, and we see a connection with Donald Trump's presidency along with Ronald Reagan's presidency as well in the early 80s when it comes to some of the familiar deep state tactics. So I want Diane to kind of go in a deeper conversation.
Yes, and for the same reasons, because what you have to realize, and I think many of your listeners are probably familiar with the Great Reset, which they're planning to announce at the World Economic Forum at the end of January in Davos, Switzerland, where basically the central banks of the world are going for a dictatorship. They said as much. Mark Carney, the former head of the Bank of England, actually said we need regime change. They don't want sovereign nations. They don't want governments. They want the banks to make the decisions to impose genocide, literally genocide. That's what the Green New Deal is. They will not invest in coal-fired power plants. They will not invest in industry. You can drop dead and freeze in the dark, freeze and starve in the dark as far as they're concerned. And it's also a way of creating a new bubble. You've heard of carbon swaps or carbon trades. So what has Trump done that offended these people so greatly? He said when he came in, he wanted to have good relations with Russia, good relations with China. He said, I'm not revealing any state secrets. If I tell you that if we have a nuclear war, there will be nothing left. That's what Eisenhower said. Eisenhower said the only thing worse than losing a nuclear war would be winning a nuclear war, because you destroy the human race. So this was not to be allowed, and the threats came fast and furious against Trump from the British in particular, who literally said in 2018 in the House of Lords that Trump would not be allowed to serve a second term, that in their view the worst thing that he did was to pull the United States out of the Paris Climate Accords. That means out of this great reset of these banks. And one member of the British House of Lords is someone who some of your listeners may know. His name is Lord Malloch Brown. He happens to be the chairman of Smartmatic, which is one of the voting machine companies. So think about that. You have the House of Lords saying that the president cannot come in for a second term. You have a member of the House of Lords who's the chairman of one of the makers of the voting machines in this country. So now, let's go back to LaRouche, and you'll see why this is so crucial. Jose, if you have that picture of LaRouche with Ronald Reagan from 1980, can you put that up there? LaRouche ran for president 8 times. There we go. And in 1980, this is a picture, I think, from a debate sponsored by the NRA up in New Hampshire in 1980. There's Lyndon LaRouche and Ronald Reagan next to him. And LaRouche had run as a Democrat, and then he ran in the general elections as an independent. And he was working on developing a laser defense system to prevent nuclear missiles from hitting. In other words, instead of having mutual and assured destruction, the policy of Henry Kissinger, where your only protection was your fear of the other, if you launched, the other guy would launch, and therefore whoever had the most nuclear weapons and could launch them the fastest won. And for any sane person, that's not really a very secure system. No. So LaRouche was in touch with Edward Teller at Lawrence Livermore Labs, the famous Hungarian-American scientist, very, I've learned, sort of typical Hungarian, very, what's the word? They're always playing devil's advocate, so it was a funny relationship back and forth. But Teller said we could devise a system, we don't have it yet, where you can have lasers that can prevent nuclear missiles from hitting. And when LaRouche was at this debate in 1980, he got a chance to speak with Ronald Reagan about this. Reagan, being sane, also was deeply concerned about nuclear war. And when he heard the idea that you could develop this system, he said, yes, let's go with it. So what happened? Fast forward. We can take down that image for a minute now. But what happened was LaRouche's forces did a number on H.W. Bush. We've always, and as people, I mean, there's a lot to know about the Bushes. We don't have to go into all of it now, but Prescott Bush was censored by the Congress for aiding and abetting the enemy. He was financing Hitler. He was the supporter of the Nazis. He was a big eugenicist. So at any rate, we did quite a job on destroying the Bushes in that election, and Ronald Reagan won the election. And after he won, he brought in LaRouche for this policy, which Reagan then adopted, and he announced March 23rd, 1983, the Strategic Defense Initiative to make nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete. Those were the words of Ronald Reagan on that historic day. Now, the people who want perpetual war went bonkers. You could say they went ballistic, because this would take that threat. It would end the Cold War off the table. And they could not have that. And they went into overdrive to try and get Reagan to drop it and to get LaRouche out of the scene. Now, if you go back a little bit, because Chris and I discussed this yesterday, shortly after Reagan took office in 1981, there was an assassination attempt by a guy named John Hinckley Jr. It was his parents, actually. The night before the assassination attempt, his parents had had dinner with H.W. Bush. His family was good friends with the Bush family. So we'll just leave that there. But luckily, Reagan survived. He announced the policy. The British Empire and its pro-war allies in American intelligence went berserk, and they did everything they could to try and stop it, to try and get Reagan to drop it. And in 1986, Reagan had a meeting with Gorbachev in Reykjavik, Iceland. As Reagan was preparing to go over there, suddenly, and there's another picture of just a part of this, one fine morning, October 6, 1986, LaRouche looks out his window, and there's 400 FBI agents, U.S. Marshals, armored vehicle carriers, and lo and behold, just like when they rounded up Roger Stone, somehow the news media was there before the FBI. You know, they just happened. Right, Jose, do you have that picture of the FBI agents? That's just two of them. It's not the whole thing, but you can imagine. At any rate, the press just happened to be strolling through the neighborhood around LaRouche's house and discovered that there were helicopters and armored vehicle carriers coming in. And we learned later through Freedom of Information that the intent was to assassinate LaRouche, to storm the house, assassinate LaRouche. LaRouche managed to get a telegram to Reagan, who did not order this, obviously. The Bush forces, William Weld, others would have been behind this, saying to Reagan, you know I'm an innocent man. If these people storm my house, any blood that's shed will be on your hands. Reagan intervened and called the thing off. However, they raided the offices of the LaRouche publications, stole lists of supporters and contributors. What happened around this time or shortly thereafter is the Department of Justice, or the government, started levying fines against our organizers for not turning over personal notebooks, and the fines were something like $1 million a day. So they determined that our companies were what they called involuntarily bankrupt, because they knew we didn't have the money, which then gave them the right to seize all of our bank accounts, making it impossible for us to pay vendors or to repay loans. And they shut down all of our publications. So I think you see a real precedent here between what they're doing to President Trump, banning him from Facebook, banning him from Twitter, banning him from YouTube, trying to shut off that voice, and what they did to LaRouche now 30 years ago. Oh, and I forget to mention, when they indicted LaRouche finally, which occurred a year after this in 1987, The prosecutor in the first LaRouche case, can you guess? Robert Mueller.
Wow. Jeez. Mr. Russiagate himself.
Yeah, the same one, which also shows, how pathetic these stupid people are. I mean, they're not recruiting, obviously. Couldn't they get a younger person to go after Trump? They had to use the same old guy who, it was probably an act that he was senile in the Congress, but it was credible because he's so old, because he was doing this 30 years ago. He's been framing people up for 30 years. So they used that involuntary bankruptcy against us, and then went and the FBI started calling up lenders who had lent money to the LaRouche movement, saying, those LaRouche people really stole your money, and we have this on you. You had an illegal handgun. We know you had whatever, stole a pack of cigarettes from it. We have something on your record. We really think you'd like to testify against LaRouche. Or they would pressure children whose parents had given large contributions to this movement, saying, your mother was really ripped off by these people. Don't you think she should be testifying? So what they did was got people to say that we were engaged, our fundraisers were engaged in a conspiracy to not repay loans. And the court ordered that the conspiracy ended the day before the illegal bankruptcy, so that it was illegal to say in the court that the reason we couldn't repay is because the government had seized all the accounts.
Wow.
Do you follow that?
Wow. That was, that's a lot of deep state information for those folks out there listening. So I wanted you guys to really listen. That was terrific. Thank you so much, Diane, for sharing that information. Now,
I want to just finish this up, if you don't mind, because what they then, just a few lessons for people who've not been in this type of political combat before, because I was naive. What happened was a federal bankruptcy judge heard about this involuntary bankruptcy, and he overturned it. He said the government was guilty of fraud on the court in that case. And so we thought, wow, we have a ruling by a federal bankruptcy judge that the government committed fraud against us. Meanwhile, LaRouche had been sentenced to 15 years in prison. My colleagues were given 77-year sentences, 86-year sentences. LaRouche served a 5-year sentence. Mike Billington served 11 years in prison for this. So we thought, okay, they've ruled that the government committed fraud on the court. We're going to get everyone out of prison. That would seem to follow, right?
yes.
No, they just ignored it. And see, then what I realized, and this is what has to be realized with the Trump case, why you're never going to win this legally. You're never going to win it in court. They didn't care that we proved that we were innocent, because they knew we were innocent the whole time. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with their desire to silence a political movement. And that's why Ramsey Clark, the former attorney general, who had been watching this case out of the corner of his eye with some interest. He had been a lawyer for he'd been attorney general during Lyndon Johnson. He was a big supporter of the civil rights movement. And he ended up taking the case on the appeal. And he said, if this LaRouche case is allowed to stand, where you have book people who've printed thousands of pages of documents on how to solve economic problems, how to solve political problems, who have thousands, tens of thousands of subscribers, a guy who's running for president, if they can get away with smearing his name, shutting down his publications, and putting him in jail, then no one in the United States is safe. That what was done to LaRouche will become a precedent for what happens in the future.
Wow. Wow. That was scary, folks, if you didn't hear that. what happened to the LaRouche team in their camp, like I said, totally innocent, but in the court of law, that's not the case, unfortunately, in this particular situation. And if they can do that to LaRouche, and you see them trying to do something similar with the president right now, with this whole bogus second impeachment. The first one was bogus, but this one's even more bogus. There's just no coming back from this for anybody. There's no, us as American citizens are just all strictly in danger if this can happen to somebody as a president, commander in chief. So this is why I really want to reach out to Deanne and speak with her and let her speak about this matter. It's just because I see the connection as we were with LaRouche, because I talked to people in the LaRouche camp and they told me his history. So I want to bring her on to speak about that, so you can see the connection, what's happening with the current president of the United States, and just pretty much wanting that information get out there, but also letting my American citizen out there and keep the fight, keep going the best we can as well on our end. But is there anything else, Diane, that you want to speak about when it comes to what you're seeing right now with the current president and what he's dealing with in terms of the impeachment and everything else?
Well, one, I think that now that these political commentators have begun comparing President Trump to Lyndon LaRouche, if he were to pardon LaRouche, really it should be exonerate, but the president, I don't think, can do that. But to issue a pardon to LaRouche along with Julian Assange and Ed Snowden, this could shatter this, what you would call the deep state, this British intelligence apparatus. And the fact that these reporters are saying, in effect, we're going to do to Trump what we did to LaRouche, means they have like a guilty conscience, like they say the thief always revisits the scene of the crime. It's a poetic principle where a guilty person exposes themselves. And in a sense, they've been trying to destroy the optimism of the American Republic, of the fight of our nation against a colonial fascist legacy. That's what LaRouche represented. That's what Trump would like to do, but LaRouche very strongly. And the presidents, I mean, look what happened in the 60s. You had 4 major assassinations in a short time. With John F. Kennedy, the president, Malcolm X was assassinated, Martin Luther King was assassinated, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. And then you had the Vietnam War. The war the Gulf of Tonkin, and they know there were false flags. Hold on, can you still see me? My internet connection is unstable.
Yeah, I'm having a little slight buffering issue here. But what Diane was speaking about was just pretty much you can see the consistency throughout history in terms of what Trump calls a deep state. People had different names throughout history for this entity. QAnoners talk about it. You hear people, when they mention Illuminati, they're speaking on the matter, but what they are referring to is a power, a establishment power that rules not only over the America, and not rules over, but it's involved in a lot of American politics, but world politics as well. So you see them throughout history pop up from time to time throughout the, past century especially, but they are still active to this day. And you see it happening right now with our current president, even from everything from, you've seen everything that happened with the COVID situation to the stolen election, leading up now to the first impeachment and second impeachment. So it's, this something that to keep an eye out for. current, current, and
just
future.
want to say a couple things. I'm back now, right? Because
Okay, yep.
I think, look, they've gone too far. We don't know how many millions of people voted for Donald Trump. 75 million, 80 million, 90 million. We don't know. I'm very suspicious. I certainly don't think 81 million voted for Joe Biden. That I don't think
That's definitely for sure. That's why he's not doing inauguration.
right.
Because
I'm not going out on a limb saying that. So, and what they're doing is so over the top that the president of Mexico has spoken out about it. Angela Merkel, who Obama spied on, has spoken out about it. Glenn Greenwald, Glenn Beck, this Russian dissident Navalny, who's blaming Putin for trying to poison him, which is absurd. But nonetheless, the Russian dissident is saying, you know, banning the president of a nuclear superpower from being able to speak publicly is outrageous. And then he said, you know, I've been getting death threats for 3 years. Twitter never banned anyone who was issuing death threats, right? So I actually think that we're going to win this fight, not in the way that people might think. Like, I don't think some crazy magic thing is going to happen and Donald Trump is going to be president after January 20th. I don't think that there's some, you know, forget all that silly fantasy stuff. But there's a poetic principle. Schiller talked about it. There's a limit to a tyrant's power. That is, when you violate natural law. And Martin Luther King understood this, whose birthday is tomorrow, it's Friday. That there's a power in the universe that if you violate natural law, that you end up sowing the seeds of your own destruction. Now, if enough people have the courage to tell the truth, because when you're truthful, you're in resonance with the laws of the universe. And therefore, if you're telling the truth, it gives you a power that the people who are violating those principles don't have. And when you attempt to oppress and silence tens of millions of people in the United States, that you try to do to the United States what has been done by previous American presidencies in Libya or Iraq or other countries, it's we're going to break this thing open, and our nation is going to be changed, and our nation is going to become much better, because as President Trump had said, what has been done should never be done to any president again. And that means a transformation of the entire culture of this country, which I think that we can bring about, not by accident, not going to be easy. It's not the way that a lot of people maybe are thinking right now, but I think we can shift that.
Okay, great. Yeah, I agree. I said this is not time to throw in the flag or anything like that. We can still put up a fight for all the craziness that's been happening in the past few months, the past year. So what we're just trying to tell people, that, keep up the good fight. And I want to also bring Diane on so she can get, her voice heard, because I, think she's done a terrific job of kind of explaining the history of, the deep state tactics. I apologize. So I just wanted to have her come say a few words. And anything else you have to say, Diane? That was like the main focus or topic that we were talking about.
I wanted to thank you, and I really appreciate your work, because you've, been one of those people who's courageous and who's been truthful. And I appreciate that you gave me the opportunity to get the story out.
No, not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. It was a story that needs to be told. And it is an important part of American history that, it gets covered by the media, of course. They don't want to talk about what happened in those situations happened in the past, but it's still part of American history. And I want those important stories to be told. And no better time to tell a story than the eve of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. So that's definitely a pleasure. So thank you very much for your time. And I would like to have you on in the future, Diane. We can do future videos together and talk about other situations that are happening in American affairs.
Great.
People should follow Diane on Twitter, by the way, at Diane Sayre. Just before people, go, just Twitter and then just type in her name, Diane Sayre, at Diane Sayre, and you'll see it. So please.
Great. And while we're announcing tomorrow night at 8, you're going to join me on my Sayre for Senate symposium.
Oh, yes. I'll
Where,
definitely.
yes, and we are going to be discussing the work of Martin Luther King because it is his birthday and how that applies to what we are going to have to do today.
Amen. I'm definitely looking forward to it. And it's definitely a blessing to have such a great leader as Martin Luther King in this country's past. I am a big reason why I live the way I live is because of his I Have a Dream speech. I grew up learning that, and to this day, I just keep it in my mind whenever I do anything when it comes to politics, debates, protesting. Keep it peaceful at all times. So I just thank you, Diane, and I appreciate Jose for coming on, taking his time out of the day as well. And anything you'd like to say, Jose, feel free. I know it's getting to that time frame. Is there anything you would like to say about what we were speaking about?
No, I would just like people to tune in tomorrow for the Diane Sayre show. And
Perfect. And Diane, how you spell your last name, Diane?
Sare.
All right. I'll just put you in the comment section, Diane Sayre on Twitter, and I'll put you a link in the description section as well.
Okay.
And remember, always, like everybody listening, to like, subscribe, and share if you enjoy the content. And like always, God bless everybody out there listening, and God bless the United States of America. Peace out.